On January 7, 1942, Adolf Hitler sat inside his headquarters at Rassenburg in East Prussia and spoke with complete confidence about the newest enemy Germany now faced. The United States of America, he told those around him, was not a serious threat. It was a decayed society, racially divided, socially unstable. Half, in his words, Judaized, and the other half negrified. A nation like that could not hold together under pressure, let alone fight a modern industrial war. America, Hitler believed, was soft, corrupt, and fundamentally incapable of sustained sacrifice. That judgment would become one of the most catastrophic miscalculations in modern history. 7,000 miles away, at almost the exact same moment, a 57-year-old industrialist named Henry Kaiser sat in a modest office near a California shipyard, sketching on hotel stationery. Kaiser had never built a ship in his life. He was not a naval engineer. He was not part of the traditional shipbuilding world. He had made his fortune building dams, roads, and massive construction projects that experts said could not be done on schedule. Now he was proposing something even more outrageous. He told his team that ships which experts claimed took 8 months to build could be completed in days. Hitler believed Americans were incapable of discipline and endurance. Kaiser was about to prove that belief catastrophically wrong. The German misjudgment of America did not begin in 1941. It was rooted in years of flawed assumptions, ideological blindness, and a fundamental misunderstanding of how American society worked. German military intelligence had studied the United States throughout the 1930s. Their conclusions were remarkably consistent and disastrously wrong. America was seen as a nation of consumers, not soldiers. A country obsessed with comfort, profit, and individual pleasure. Its army in 1939 ranked among the smallest in the world, smaller than that of Portugal. Its factories produced automobiles, refrigerators, radios, and washing machines, not tanks or aircraft. Its people, German analysts believed, had grown fat and lazy during decades of peace. When President Franklin Roosevelt announced in May 1940 that the United States would produce 50,000 military aircraft per year, the German High Command dismissed the claim as propaganda. In 1939, the entire American aviation industry had produced fewer than 3,000 military aircraft. Increasing that output nearly 20-fold sounded absurd. Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, openly mocked the idea. He had personally overseen the creation of Germany's air force from almost nothing into the most feared aviation arm in Europe. He understood the complexity of aircraft production. Precision machining. Specialized alloys. Skilled labor. Long development cycles. America, in his view, had none of the necessary foundations. German generals also relied on their memory of the First World War. American troops had arrived late, fought competently but briefly, and suffered relatively light casualties compared to the European powers. To many German officers, the Americans of 1918 had seemed inexperienced, enthusiastic, and untested. That image hardened into doctrine. Albert Speer later recalled Hitler repeatedly stating that Americans had never endured real sacrifice. They would not withstand a prolonged trial by fire. This belief fit perfectly into Nazi racial ideology. Hitler believed national strength flowed from racial purity and cultural homogeneity. Germany, in his imagination, was a unified Volk forged by blood and history. America, by contrast, was a chaotic mixture of immigrants, ethnic minorities, and competing loyalties. To Hitler, this diversity was not a strength but proof of weakness. A nation without racial unity could not fight with discipline or cohesion. The flaw in this thinking was fatal. German leaders evaluated American potential based entirely on America's behavior in peacetime. They saw an unmobilized society and concluded it could not mobilize. They saw factories making consumer goods and assumed those factories could not be converted. They saw diversity and assumed fragmentation. Every assumption was wrong. The transformation began before America even entered the war. In 1940, with France defeated and Britain under siege, Roosevelt openly challenged American industry to perform what he called a miracle. Automobile factories would stop making cars. Appliance plants would stop making refrigerators. Civilian production would be gutted and redirected toward war. This was not incremental change. It was a complete reordering of the American economy. In 1941, American factories produced over 3 million automobiles. Over the next 4 years, only 139 more would be built. The rest of that capacity went into tanks, trucks, aircraft engines, artillery, and weapons. General Motors alone produced aircraft engines, machine guns, trucks, tanks, and ammunition. Chrysler built fuselages. Packard produced Rolls-Royce Merlin engines for British fighters. Companies that had never manufactured weapons learned how to do so with astonishing speed. What German intelligence failed to understand was that American industry had already mastered the most important skill of modern war, mass production through standardization. The system of interchangeable parts, pioneered decades earlier for civilian manufacturing, allowed components built in different states by different factories to fit together perfectly. A carburetor made in Ohio could fit an engine built in Michigan and power a vehicle assembled in California. That system now scaled to weapons. Aircraft skeptics insisted planes were too complex. A bomber had over 1 million parts. An automobile had around 15,000. Aircraft tolerances were measured in thousandths of an inch. Mistakes meant death. Henry Kaiser ignored the skeptics entirely. In late 1940, Kaiser won a contract to build 30 cargo ships for Britain. He had no shipyard, no skilled workforce, and no experience. What he had was a system. Kaiser viewed shipbuilding not as a craft but as a manufacturing problem. He broke the process into modules, simplified tasks, substituted machines for skilled labor wherever possible, and designed workflows that could be learned in days instead of years. Traditional shipbuilders said his ships would sink. They were wrong. Kaiser's defect rates were lower than those of traditional yards. Welding replaced riveting. Entire sections of ships were prefabricated and assembled like building blocks. Workers were trained ruthlessly and efficiently. A person could become a competent welder in 10 days. Kaiser recruited workers from everywhere. Farmers displaced by the Dust Bowl. Laid off factory workers. Women who had never held industrial jobs. African Americans who had been excluded from skilled labor in the segregated South. At its peak, Kaiser's Richmond shipyards employed over 90,000 workers. Nearly 1/3 were women. The result stunned the world. Liberty ships that once took 230 days to build were completed in 45 days, then 30, then 20. In November 1942, Kaiser's yard built the Liberty ship Robert E. Perry in 4 days and 15 hours from keel to launch. It took less time to build than it took a German U-boat to cross the Atlantic. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the German submarine fleet, had based Germany's Atlantic strategy on a simple equation. U-boats would sink Allied shipping faster than it could be replaced. Early 1942 seemed to confirm this belief. German submarines ravaged the American East Coast during what they called the Second Happy Time. Ships burned within sight of American cities. The Americans were unprepared. No blackouts. No convoys. No coordination. Hundreds of ships were sunk in months. Donitz believed victory was inevitable. But the numbers began to betray him. American shipyards launched 8 million tons of shipping in 1942. 19 million in 1943. By late 1943, new construction exceeded losses. Every ship sunk was replaced by 2 more. The math became hopeless. Donitz needed to sink 700,000 tons per month. American yards were producing more than 1 million tons per month. In May 1943, U-boat losses became unsustainable. 43 submarines were lost in a single month. The Atlantic campaign was effectively over. The same industrial logic played out in the air. Ford's Willow Run plant outside Detroit became the symbol of American production power. The factory covered over 3 million square feet. Its mission was to mass-produce the B-24 Liberator bomber, one of the most complex aircraft ever built. Ford attempted something aircraft manufacturers said was impossible, building bombers on a moving assembly line. Early failures were brutal. Design changes wrecked workflows. The press mocked the plant as "Will it run?" But Ford persisted. Engineers worked non-stop converting hand-drawn designs into production specifications. Subcontractors across the country fed parts into a vast logistical network. Engines, propellers, landing gear, wiring, all arrived synchronized. By 1944, Willow Run produced one bomber every 63 minutes. In April alone, it built 453 B-24s. At peak efficiency, production outpaced the military's ability to deploy aircraft. Storage fields overflowed. By war's end, America had produced nearly 300,000 military aircraft. That single nation outproduced the entire Axis combined. German planners who had dismissed Roosevelt's promises as fantasy now watched their skies fill with enemy aircraft they could not replace losses against. On the battlefield, early encounters seemed to confirm German prejudice. In February 1943, American ground forces were mauled at Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. Units broke. Command collapsed. Equipment was abandoned. German officers sneered. Rommel himself initially dismissed the Americans as undisciplined amateurs. But then something unexpected happened. The Americans learned fast. Commanders were relieved. Tactics were revised. Training programs were rewritten. George Patton took over and imposed brutal discipline. More importantly, the U.S. Army institutionalized failure. Lessons learned at Kasserine were analyzed, documented, and distributed across the entire force. Training back home changed within weeks. Rommel noticed. He later wrote that American resistance improved with startling speed. Within months, the same army that had panicked now fought effectively. By May 1943, Axis forces in North Africa surrendered en masse. Over 275,000 German and Italian troops became prisoners. The pattern repeated everywhere. Americans stumbled early, adapted rapidly, and improved continuously. Their strength was not brilliance or elegance. It was learning capacity backed by overwhelming production. German military culture, by contrast, became rigid. Doctrine hardened. Initiative declined. Hitler's interference crushed honest feedback. Failure became dangerous to admit. Commanders told Hitler what he wanted to hear, not what was true. When D-Day came, German commanders were stunned by the scale of Allied power. Over 156,000 troops landed in a single day, supported by thousands of ships and aircraft. American industry made that possible. American logistics sustained it. When German defenders resisted, they were buried under artillery, tanks, and air power. Firepower replaced blood. Hitler never accepted reality. Even in his bunker in 1945, he insisted America was weak and corrupt. If Germany lost, it was betrayal, not miscalculation. He died believing his assumptions were right. They were not. America outproduced Germany nearly 3-1. It built more aircraft in a year than Germany had possessed at the start of the war. It replaced losses faster than Germany could inflict them. It trained soldiers faster than Germany could kill them. The soft nation crushed the Reich under an avalanche of steel. The German failure was not just a failure of intelligence. It was a failure of imagination. They saw what they wanted to see. A weak America that fit their ideology. They never understood the America that existed beneath the surface. Chaotic. Diverse. Inefficient by European standards. But capable of mobilizing faster, learning quicker, and producing more than any nation in history. Henry Kaiser returned to civilian life after the war. Willow Run became a car plant. The workers scattered back to ordinary jobs. The greatest industrial mobilization in human history faded quietly into memory. But its lesson remains brutal and clear. Never judge a nation by how it behaves in peace. Never mistake diversity for weakness. Never assume comfort means incapacity. And never underestimate what ordinary people can do when survival demands the impossible. Hitler did. And it destroyed him.